20 to 9. Rugby and war will always share a special connection here in New Zealand particularly, both playing a crucial role when it comes to shaping our national identity. Now that connection's set to be recorded in a special book. It's called War Blacks. Here's the book, beautifully presented. Author Matt Elliott joins us now. Matt, thank you for coming in.
Good morning.
This is a really interesting project, a very niche book.
Yes.
Although combining two huge topics. Are you war historian or All Black fan and aficionado? How does this come about?
Probably an All Black fan first, and I became interested in war, the First World War history, when I discovered my grandfather's diary from 1917, about 10 years ago. And I've written about Dave Gallagher, who was an All Black captain in 1905 and soldier, and this is sort of an extension of that. I was always interested about how many All Blacks had been in the First World War, because we know about the 13 who lost their lives, but I wondered how many more had been servicemen.
And having a good look through your book, there's an awful lot of them.
93.
Yeah, yes. And so you basically take each individually and you track where they've come from, where their rugby careers were, and how they managed to... It's almost like how they managed to fit the war in to their rugby lives, or how the war then defined who they became.
Yes, well, some were All Blacks and then there was the war, and others were All Blacks afterwards. And I think it's worthwhile to put in context a rugby career, you know, particularly if someone has been through the First World War and the horrors of the First World War, and then they're playing rugby after the war. You know, particularly if they're a great name in the game, like Maurice Brownlee or someone like that, to think about them serving 3 years in the Middle East and then, you know, they're playing rugby almost for fun, really, afterwards.
And then you also get a flavour of the excitement at the beginning of the war, like the All Blacks who were touring at the time, saying, right, we're going to be first to sign up, off we go. Yes,
and to talk about, well, the thought that the war wouldn't last very long, and the terminology of it being a game. And then it goes for 4 years, and it's something much worse.
Yeah, which is what I meant when I sort of the idea of fitting this war into their lives here in New Zealand, playing rugby, and it became so much bigger, didn't it? This culminates in the Invincibles tour, which of course followed on 6 years after the end of the Great War, and you focus on that in particular as well in the book.
Yes, you know, that was one of the great All Black sides, and there were 10 of the forwards who had been in the war, and I think that laid a platform, the fact that they'd been servicemen and they'd travelled across to the other side of the world. Going away on an All Black tour wasn't the unknown that it was in 1905 in terms of travel and how you have to prepare yourselves and so on. They'd done that in the army, so now they were doing it, you know, wearing a different uniform.
And on a very small scale, that also talks about something... And we've always talked about how the Great War helped to forge our national identity, New Zealand's identity on the global stage. It broke us away from being, you know, the poor underlings or the cousins of the great British Empire. And in a similar way, you think that also works into this story with our rugby players as going away as the Invincibles, I guess.
Yes, and it really did something for rugby, because rugby stopped in New Zealand because all the men were away fighting, but it continued, you know, under the auspices of the army, and the army teams had to uphold the reputation of the national rugby team, and the reputation of the services team in 1919 was really something that laid a platform for later All Black teams, and it began our contact with South Africa, which is really important. So the way the game carried on in wartime was really important for, you know, how the game is today.
At the very least, Matt, you've produced a wonderful record, and something which certainly 93, the families of the descendants of 93 All Blacks should all try and get a hold of. And a great deal more than that, though, the flavour you give us of these young men and what was going through their minds and their lives at the time. So, yeah, you call it the extraordinary story, and it is an extraordinary story. Matt Elliott's War Blacks. Here you go. Here's a look at the book. Very beautifully presented as well. Thanks for coming in and sharing that with us.
Thank you.